how when you look at a long list of historical kings, it's usually just a jumble of names and dates, right? Well, what if I told you that for one European kingdom, that list isn't random at all? It's actually a puzzle, a hidden code with this incredible symmetry, just waiting to be cracked. And today, we're going to crack it together. So let's start with just one number, 27. Between the years 858 and 1272, that's over 400 years of history, Hungary had 27 different rulers on the throne. As you can probably guess, that's a whole lot of history, and a ton of names to try and keep straight. And here they are. This is the official list, all the way from the early chieftain Almos down to King Stephen V. At first glance, it kind of confirms what you'd expect. It's just a long, messy, seemingly random sequence of names. I mean, it's a little intimidating, right? Where would you even start looking for a pattern in all of this? And that is the big question we're tackling here. What if this isn't random? What if there's a deliberate, almost mathematical structure hiding in plain sight, just underneath the surface of this official history? Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. The source material we're looking at gives us this huge clue. It points to a very clear dividing line in Hungarian history. That moment, they switched from pagan to Christian rule. And this isn't just some religious detail. It turns out it's the key that unlocks the entire puzzle. All right, let's actually do that. Let's take that clue and run with it. We take our list of 27 rulers and we slice off the first 6, the pagan rulers. That leaves us with this very specific group of 21 Christian kings, starting with the famous Stephen I. This is the group we need to zoom in on. So the source lays out this really clear step-by-step way to see the pattern. First, we've isolated our 21 kings. Done. Next, we're going to arrange them into groups. And then we're going to see the simple but amazing rule that seems to hold the whole thing together.
And bam! Here's the first big reveal. Those 21 kings, they split perfectly into 3 groups of 7. Not 6, not 8, 3 clean, neat columns of 7 rulers each. Right away, this looks so much more organized, way less random than that long list we started with. This suggests a kind of deliberate structure that's really unusual for historical chronicles from this time.
Okay, but here's the real kicker. The source proposes this very specific rule that governs these blocks of 7. It's simple. In each block, the first king and the 7th, the last king, are supposed to have the exact same name. Let's just call it the first and last rule. Now, the real question is, does it actually work? So let's put this rule to the test. We'll start with the middle block, block 2. The first king is Ladislas I. The 7th and final king in that block is Ladislas II. It's a perfect match. So far, so good. The rule holds. Okay, what about the last block, block 3? It starts with Stephen IV. It ends with Stephen V. Wow, another perfect match. So 2 out of the 3 blocks follow this rule to the letter, which is already pretty incredible. But now for the final test. What about that very first block? This is the moment of truth. The first block starts with Stephen I. So if the rule holds, it should end with another Stephen. But it doesn't. The 7th king is actually Geza I. Now, the source points this out as the only break in the entire pattern, which honestly kind of makes the whole thing even more fascinating. And just when you think you've seen it all, there's one more layer of symmetry here. Just look at the names that start the first and third blocks. Block 1 kicks off with Stephen I, and Block 3 kicks off with Stephen IV. The entire structure is literally bookended by the same royal name. And here it is, the whole thing laid out. What started as this totally chaotic list, well, now you can see it for what it is, this incredibly organized, deeply symmetrical structure. You've got 3 blocks of 7, governed by that first and last rule, with one really interesting exception, and the whole thing is framed by the name Stephen. It's an amazing piece of hidden historical architecture. This isn't just a list, it's a story. So you've got to be wondering, why did it stop? Why doesn't this pattern just keep going? Well, our source tells us that this whole perfectly structured period belongs to one single royal family, the Arpad Dynasty. And when that dynasty ended, the pattern ended with it. This timeline right here really puts it into perspective. You can see the pattern held strong for almost 300 years. But after 1272, the direct Arpad family line breaks down. The kingdom falls into a period of anarchy, and that opens the door for foreign rulers to come in. The old symmetrical order was completely shattered.
So, in the chaos after the last of the Arpads, the Hungarian nobles were scrambling. They started looking outside their borders for a new king. Rulers were brought in from Venice, from Bohemia, and eventually a new dynasty was founded by Charles I from the French House of Anjou. And with all these new foreign influences, that old, very specific naming structure, it just vanished.
So, on one hand, you've got the usual messy reality of history. But then you look at something like the official list of rulers for, say, medieval Hungary, and something just feels a little off. It's almost too neat, too structured. Instead of all that chaos we expect, you find this almost mathematical precision. There's an underlying order here that, honestly, just doesn't feel accidental at all.
Okay, so our investigation is going to start in Hungary. Why Hungary? Because it gives us the clearest blueprint for this whole mystery. The official history of its early rulers is just so perfectly organized that you have to take a closer look. And this, right here, this is the key. 27. From their legendary beginnings way back around 858 all the way to the end of their main royal dynasty in 1272, the official count of Hungarian rulers is exactly 27. Now, I know what you're thinking. A number on its own might not mean much. But trust me, it's how this number is structured that reveals the whole pattern. So check this out. The 27 rulers are split neatly into two very distinct eras. First, you've got the 6 foundational pagan rulers, the guys who started it all, from Almos to Geza. Then, right after them, starting with the very first Christian king, Stephen I, you have a list of exactly 21 Christian rulers. So, 6 plus 21, that gets you to 27. It's a really clean break, but believe it or not, the structure gets even more precise.
Yeah, when we look at that Christian era, the structure just gets wild. Those 21 kings, they're not just a random list. The chronicles actually present them in 3 perfectly symmetrical blocks of exactly 7 kings each, 3 groups of 7. I mean, think about that. That kind of perfect organization stretched across almost 300 years of history, that's highly unusual, to say the least.
Okay, so at this point, you're probably thinking, all right, a weird historical curiosity in Hungary, cool. Well, this is where it gets really strange, because this wasn't just some local thing. As we're about to see, the exact same pattern starts popping up all across the continent. Seriously, the scale of this mystery is just stunning. Hungary was not alone, not by a long shot. During the same medieval period, both Denmark and Scotland also list exactly 27 rulers. And get this, if you make a few adjustments for what the old chronicles called irregular kings, usurpers or guys who ruled for a super short time, then both Poland and Norway also land on that same magic number, 27. That's 5 different kingdoms, all with the same hidden structure.
And here's a crucial point. This is not a universal pattern. You don't find this kind of structure in the histories of, say, France or England or the Holy Roman Empire. Nope. It's specifically concentrated in the more newly Christianized kingdoms of Northern and Eastern Europe. And that strongly suggests there was some kind of shared influence or a common way of thinking among the historians in that part of the world.
So at this point, calling it a coincidence just seems incredibly unlikely, right? I mean, the odds of 5 different nations all independently coming up with a historical record with the exact same number of rulers, they've got to be astronomical. So that leaves only one real alternative. This was intentional, it was done on purpose. The real question is, why? What on earth was the message they were trying to send?
Well, to understand the why, we actually have to step out of history for a second and into theology. The secret to this whole puzzle, it turns out, lies in a concept called Christian numerology. This is the idea that numbers weren't just for counting, they were packed with deep spiritual meaning. See, in the medieval mind, numbers were literally a key to understanding God's plan for the world. Certain numbers had this powerful, symbolic weight that came directly from the scriptures. People really saw God as the great architect of the universe. And numbers were part of his divine language.
So, what's so special about the number 27? Well, let's start with the math. It's 3 times 3 times 3, and the number 3, for medieval Christians, was considered maybe the most sacred number of all. It represented perfection, divinity, the whole shebang. So when you cube it, multiplying it by itself 3 times, you're amplifying that sacredness to its highest possible degree.
And why 3? Well, of course, it symbolized the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So the number 27, being 3 cubed, was seen as the ultimate numerical expression of the Trinity. It represented divine perfection, a sense of completion, and God's presence right here in the world. But here it is.
This is the single most important connection of all. The canon of the New Testament, the absolute foundation of Christian faith, is made up of, you guessed it, exactly 27 books. And that was absolutely no accident. For theologians, that number signified that the New Testament was the complete, perfect, and final testimony of God's revelation to humanity.
Okay, now we can finally put all the pieces together. We have this bizarre historical pattern on one side and this incredibly powerful theological symbol on the other. And when you put them side by side, the motive behind the 27 kings, it becomes crystal clear.
I mean, when you lay it all out, the parallel is just undeniable. Those chroniclers weren't just recording facts. No way. They were actively shaping the history of their newly Christian kingdoms to mirror the structure of the New Testament itself. By organizing their past into 27 rulers, they were making a huge theological statement. They were saying that their kingdom's history was a complete and perfect story, guided by God, just like the Holy Scripture.
And this just leaves us with a really fascinating final thought, doesn't it? It kind of forces us to reconsider what we even think of as history. These medieval scribes, maybe they saw their job not as objectively recording every single messy detail, but as telling a higher truth. Their job was to craft a narrative that placed their nation squarely within God's divine plan. For them, history wasn't just what happened. It was a story with a purpose, a story told in numbers,